Thank you for joining us for a review of the Hamilton County Disaster Recovery Framework. The outline of this presentation is as follows: an introduction to our agency and what we do, phases of disaster, emergency plans, disaster recovery framework, recovery task force, recovery elements, goals and strategies, recovery functions, coordinating agencies, recovery function breakdown, after action reports, and the importance of public input. Please keep in mind this is an all hazards recovery framework and does not necessarily respond to just the current pandemic. Please visit Hamilton County's public health website for more information on COVID-19. As an agency, Hamilton County Emergency Management and Homeland Security serves as a multifunctional entity. We coordinate disaster preparedness and public safety related to emergency management activities to serve and protect the public. We are concerned with all natural and man-made hazards, including international and domestic acts of terrorism and homeland security functions. We coordinate and administer countywide all-hazard emergency management and disaster preparedness functions for Hamilton County and its political subdivisions. While this framework focuses on recovery, it is important to understand the phases of disaster, which are preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. Preparedness involves pre-emergency efforts to assure a coordinated response during a disaster. Response is actions that are taken during or directly after an emergency to save lives and minimize damage. Recovery, which is the focus of this framework, begins immediately after an emergency and may coincide with response efforts. Recovery consists of both short and long-term efforts, ranging from returning to operating standards to rebuilding community facilities. Mitigation is done before or after a disaster to eliminate or reduce the risk of life and property. The current emergency plans for the county are the 2016 Emergency Operations Plan, the 2018 Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan, the 2020 to 2022 Multi-Year Training and Exercise Plan, as well as two plans that are currently in development: continuity of operations and continuity of government. The disaster recovery framework is the focus of this presentation. For more information on Hamilton County's emergency plans, please visit their website, which is linked on the slide, and click on the Planning tab. The disaster recovery framework embodies the basic direction of the county should move after any given disaster. It describes comprehensively the roles and responsibilities for all participants in order to ensure that they are prepared to begin the recovery process during and immediately following the response phase, focusing on short-term recovery first. We will focus on how to deal with the short, intermediate, and long-term recovery from a disaster. The Recovery Task Force is the main component of the Disaster Recovery Framework, or DRF. The Recovery Task Force, or RTF, is a main component of the DRF and designed to work across government and community lines to plan for and make timely recommendations in support of the recovery operations and priorities. It also serves as a deliberative body that takes a look at the many competing needs presented across the community and across the topics and disciplines represented by each recovery function, or RF. In this role, the RTF needs to assess competing demands, facilitate setting priorities, and make thoughtful, balanced, and effective recommendations for recovery functions. It also acts as an advisory group for communicating to jurisdictions and governments and as a communication hub. The RTF are directed to ensure a whole community approach to problem solving pre and post-event. The primary focus of the RTF is communication and coordination that aligns with Hamilton County's recovery efforts and priorities, communicates RF-specific information up, down, and across the county, so community decision makers have a current understanding of the specific issues and needs being experienced by each area. They also communicate overarching recovery priorities across RFs, so decisions made by individual RFs are informed by and in line with current needs across the community. They also clarify decision-making and roles pre- and post-disaster. The current members of the RTF include the following: Hamilton County Admin, Hamilton County EMHSA, Job and Family Services, the Engineer's Office, Planning and Development, Public Health, HCDC Incorporated, Human Services Chamber of Hamilton County, City of Cincinnati Fire Department Emergency Management Division, City of Cincinnati Urban Conservator, and the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority, or CMHA. Hamilton County must ensure that certain fundamental community components are restored as part of the recovery process before tackling new opportunities recovery presents. These 5 recovery elements are to be used by the recovery functions to assess the goals for each phase of recovery. Communities that are successful in reestablishing these 5 recovery elements will be more likely to recover from a disaster event because people have a reason to reinvest, keeping in mind the concept of flexibility. So there are 5 recovery elements, and they are critical functions, services and programs, vital resources, facilities, and infrastructure. Critical functions are a service or a collection of services normally performed within Hamilton County that must continue at a sufficient level without interruption or restart within a given time frame after a disruption to the service. Services and programs are work or activities performed within the county that benefits the community or that are intended to help residents beyond those normally provided by the market or for-profit institutions. Vital resources are assets necessary to fulfill the critical functions and offer the services and programs within the county. Facilities are physical buildings or locations. Infrastructure is the basic physical structures and public works, not including facilities, that are needed for the operation of critical functions, services, or programs within Hamilton County. Each RF has associated short and long-term goals to allow each coordinating agency to visualize and set priorities for recovery processes. It should be noted that these goals can overlap and phases may take more time or less time than projected. Each goal begins with an evaluation of current circumstances and then moves into more distinct goals based on what the RF is addressing. The graphic on the next page displays the short and long-term goals for each recovery function. The short-term goals' main objective for each RF is evaluating damages and impacts and assessing what the current needs of the communities are. The long-term goals focus more on coordination and communication of implementation strategies for rebuilding the community post-disaster. To clarify roles and responsibilities for recovery, there are 6 recovery functions. These recovery functions include operational and community coordination, economic, housing, infrastructure, public health and social services, and natural and cultural resources. There will be 6 recovery function annex documents which outline the activities unique to each entity and will outline the scope, purpose, and concept of operations for each entity assigned to the recovery function. Each RF will be led by a specified coordinating agency who will collaborate and utilize supporting agencies to fulfill the goals set out in each RF. These agencies are the relative expert of their field and are not tasked with being the sole coordinator of all aspects of their RF, but rather to assist EMHSA to understand what needs aren't being met and how they can gather needed resources. Some of their roles and responsibilities include coordinating the activities of supporting agencies, coordinating with local, state, and federal levels for any applicable needs or support in the RF designation, collaborate with other coordinating agencies to assure effective response, share RF activity information with appropriate Emergency Operations Center personnel, and stay informed to the ongoing activities of the agency or organization they represent. So now we will review the 6 recovery functions, starting with operational and community coordination. So they will address the following issues by evaluating community needs, engaging with the community, helping coordinate unanticipated needs that have to do with other recovery functions, aiding the organization of assistance centers, initiating recovery planning, and coordinating donations and volunteer management. This coordinating agency will be the Hamilton County Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. Next is economic. This RF will evaluate and identify the impacts on businesses. These are typically focused more on economic aspects over actual physical buildings. They can also amend regulatory code compliance and permitting issues that may arise, identify and assist businesses in connecting with employees, goods, and markets, coordinate business retention and support, as well as communicating and promoting the economic strength and recovery of the county. Hamilton County Development Company Incorporated, or HCDC, will be the coordinating agency for this RF. For housing, the coordinating agency will evaluate and identify the impacts of the housing stock in the county, provide interim housing, provide assistance to homeowners and renters, and ensure the provision of affordable and safe housing for all impacted residents. Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority, or CMHA, is the coordinating agency for this RF. Next, we have infrastructure, who will again begin by evaluating the impacts on county infrastructure, restore mobility and critical services without losing the opportunity to implement creative solutions, and use post-disaster rebuilding as an opportunity to rethink, redesign, and update Hamilton County's infrastructure. Hamilton County Engineers Office, HCEO, will be the coordinating agency for this RF. RF number 5 is Public Health and Social Services. They will evaluate the impacts and needs of public health and social services, expedite restoration of the healthcare system, and support to physical and mental health, coordinate service delivery, meeting the changing healthcare and social service needs, prioritizing services for vulnerable populations, communicate frequently and consistently with the public to promote health and raise awareness of available resources, coordinate recovery actions across public and private educational providers at all levels, and repair Hamilton County's damaged healthcare, social services, and educational facilities and systems. Hamilton County Public Health, or HCPH, will be the coordinating agency for this RF. And last, we have Natural and Cultural, who will begin by evaluating the needs and capabilities of Hamilton County's natural and cultural assets and set a phased recovery strategy, preserve and facilitate the restoration and betterment of Hamilton County's natural assets, as well as encouraging the rehabilitation of damaged historic sites and to connect arts, culture, and community organizations to the recovery effort and normalization process. The Cincinnati Urban Conservator's Office will be the coordinating agency for this RF. An after-action report will be completed after a disaster incident and will allow information to be collected and used to improve the framework for the next potential disaster. Some of the questions that may arise for creating the AAR are listed below. How was the recovery overall handled? What went right? What did not? What are the unforeseen issues that arose? What resources were or were not available? And were there any RFs or coordinating agencies that were either overwhelmed or underutilized? Public input is important for any type of community plan. It allows us to identify any issues we may have not addressed and keep our goals and strategies practical. Please take a moment to follow the attached link and fill out a brief survey after reviewing the framework. For any further questions or comments, please contact Ryan McEwen at Hamilton County EMHSA, and thank you for your time.